Lynn read beautifully the third in a trilogy in Luke 15. We talked about the other two a few weeks ago. The lost sheep and the shepherd who found it, the lost coin, and the woman who turned the house upside down to find it. And now this story, the lost or the prodigal son. I'm fascinated that though these parables are about joy and celebration when God finds us, that the way the scriptures kind of codify them is negative. We talk about the lost coin, not the found coin. Ooh, the lost sheep, not the found sheep. And you heard Lynn say it, she didn't make it up, the prodigal son. Prodigal being the one who spends lavishly, wastes money, gambling and hanging out with wild women, that kind of son, as opposed to the found son, or even maybe the father. I want to talk a little bit about the prodigal father as I think about home. But first, I want to tell you, I have had a hard time this week. Okay, you too? You know, when you're preaching, you're kind of hanging around with the text, you're reading them in different translations, and even looking at the Greek and the Hebrew. And almost every time I got ready to talk about the dad in the story, I thought about the dead dads, you know, the ones whose lives have been cut short and the way their families are just like obliterated. And I found myself, though this is not central to the sermon, actually weeping for my own dad, who'll be 82 in November, and who spends almost all of his days nursing my mom, who will be 80. And I thought about their upbringing. I thought about them growing up in Mississippi, him in the woods, her in the Delta. I thought about their black lives, honestly, and could hardly breathe, thinking about what they endured growing up in Jim Crow and what it must be like right now to be people their age watching the news. How do they feel, I wondered? Do they feel like we haven't moved forward? Do they feel like we've fallen backwards? And then every time I cried for them, I realized I was feeling sorry for myself too. Because my heart is broken. How about yours? Just so disgusted and so disappointed and so sad about the state of our union. And it's kind of hard to dive in a sermon without getting that in the air. So will you hold that with me? Don't you just feel also kind of like, ugh, right? So you think about the yuckiness of our world. You think about a congressman who'll say the black people hate the white people because the black people are jealous of the white people, because the white people are successful and the black people aren't. What in the hell? You think about our home. Our nation is our home. And you think about what kind of home it is. You know, psychologists like Donald Winnicott talk about home as the container in which we grow, the learning space, the safe space in which we become a person. And the home starts in the womb, like the baby's in the womb, and that's the first home. And then the womb or the container gets wider in the arms of a mom or a dad when the toddler's toddling around. And the womb, the container, the home gets larger when the kindergartner goes off to school and the mommy goes, bye. And she starts crying and the kinder's like, get over it, girl. It's going to be okay. You know, the child is okay and the parent's in trouble. But the ever-widening home space, the ever-widening container in which we become a person. Donald Winnicott would say, a good enough home leads to a good enough person. A good enough home, not a perfect home, just a good enough home. Basically, if you cry, somebody will come and take care of you. Basically, if you're wet, pretty soon they'll come change your diaper. Just a good enough home. And I find myself thinking about this home called America, the Mississippi, the Jim Crow for my parents, the walking by the water fountain to the colored water fountain. I drank from a colored water fountain in Mississippi. Is the container good enough? Is the home good enough to make good enough people? Like, is the container good enough for first-generation immigrants? Is the container good enough for Mexican Americans who are trying to figure out how to get citizenship and thinking, well, damn, that land used to be ours, and now it's not. Is the container good enough? Is the home good enough for rising anti-Semitism? I'm not even sure if I know why it's rising, but it is all over the globe. Is it, like Time magazine says, because Europe and all over the globe is just kind of turning to the right? Like a righting of the leftness, like a fixing of the progress, like a diminishing, a backward stepping because we've come so far. Is this container good enough for my African American brothers who are 52, 47, and 43 to even drive around the streets in Chicago and just be okay? Like, I ask them, are you okay? When I get to the gas station, I do my business and get out as fast as I can. That's the container for professional black young men in Chicago. Is the container of our nation good enough if you're sitting in your car smoking a joint and the policeman will go suit up to come back for you? You understand what I'm saying? Is the container good enough for Muslims and Sikhs? I don't know. But I want to put that not good enough container next to this incredibly beautiful story of love and grace that is so profound, we can pretend like it's not this profound. And here's what it is. There's 4 characters in this story. Those of us who like to think about narratives. 2 sons and a father. And the story starts like this. There was a father who had 2 sons. That's how you know it's mostly about him. There was a father who had 2 sons in a context, in a container that frankly probably wasn't that good either. But in that context, in that patriarchal context, the younger son had no rights unless somebody died. And the older son had only the rights that his father conferred to him. There was a father who had 2 sons. The younger one, who had no rights, demanded from his father that he be given what's owed him, which would only be owed him if the father was dead. It's kind of funky request. Daddy, give me what you owe me when you die, now. And then there's another son, and that son resents the heck out of the younger son. There's echoes of that in the culture right now, right? Who's entitled and who's not? Who deserves and who doesn't? Who has the right to own and prosper and who's not really a person? But let me come back to that another time. There's a father who had 2 sons, one entitled to nothing, and the father gave him everything that he asked for. Everything he had the audacity to ask for. All that he had the nerve to demand, the father gave it to him. And then the cranky, resentful son who opts out, who's pissed and petulant, the father doesn't discipline him. He says, dude, come party with us. The one that was dead is alive and the one that was lost is found. This text is about a father and the kind of home he creates. What kind of home, what kind of container does a father create? I love that it's a father, because fathers get a bad rep. Our culture doesn't teach men tenderness often. Our culture doesn't teach men to cry and hug and touch their babies and rub their hair. And oh my God, this tender dad, this dad breaks the rules all over the place by giving to that demanding brat kid what he needed, what he wanted, without deserving it. That dad created a context, a container in which you could ask for what you need. You could be wrong. You could sin boldly, the Lutherans would say. You could transgress. It was a transgressive request held close by the dad. What kind of home is it that you're making when your child knows you can make mistakes? You can fall down. You can be needy. You can be vulnerable. You can be lost. You can act out and go away and come back to this home, the Father says, to this container. This is an elastic space. This is a loose enough space for you to try on new identities and come back and say, I really screwed that up. What kind of home is it that this father made where the older brother got to confess his weaknesses and demonstrate his flaws and be ugly and also still be loved? What would our container, Middle Church, our home, this home, be like if it was like the home the Father made? So think with me about that for a minute. Sandy Stone, is she here? I get in trouble telling on people without permission. So let's pretend like I didn't say her name. But a woman whose initials are Sandy Stone wrote us a really beautiful note the other day and said she'd been out sick and she's asked us to pray for her and she's doing better and she was going to try to be here this Sunday. And in the bottom of the note she wrote, I've only not been there because I'm sick. She, quote, said, you didn't do anything. And our new staff, Lynn, I'm telling on you. Lynn says, what does that mean? I go, oh, Sandy's a pastor. She's a church girl. She knows that sometimes people feel offended or hurt or sad or scared or angry, and they ain't trying to come to church for about 6 years until you get it together. Or they might come back on the 5th and a half year and be like, did you miss me? You know? What would it be like? I know, I just really showed out right there, huh, Laura? What would it be like if this was a container, a safe space, a home space, in which we could actually make mistakes together and forgive each other and love each other and try to grow together, to be a learning community together, to say, oh my God, I really got that wrong. Could you forgive that? Can I come back into your safe grace space? What if we were that kind of home? What if we were the kind of home where we could ask each other for what we need? Shut up, you are getting too close. Or maybe said nicely, could you give me some space? What if we could say, I'm confused by that? What if we could say, I'm angry. I don't understand. What if we could, multiracial, multicultural, multi-everything space that we are, be also the space where we didn't have to be politically correct, where we could take risks, where we could absolutely try to just see each other into existence, like the Zulu people do. I am because you are, or I see you, therefore I exist. What if we, in this space, would be a container in which we could actually rehearse being our best selves? And along with it, rehearse the reign of God to come. I mean in a vulnerable place where we're like children, because God says that's what the kingdom of God is like, a child space. Now, what's that got to do with the thing I started with the craziness out there? If we can rehearse here an ethic of love and generosity and grace and forgiveness and 16 chances, not just second. If we can rehearse here vulnerability, truth-telling, honesty, candor, maybe we can be ambassadors for this kind of container and love out there, at work, in our classrooms, in our families. Maybe we can carefront the other around craziness. Like, people actually still call each other the N-word. I know that occasionally people mock Asian people. I know that. I know that people still talk about the F word for gays. Even some of the people we love can still be mean. If we can rehearse here the kind of container where we can practice what it means to love, maybe we can take it out in the world, take it to the streets, take it into our world. And then we will be behaving the container that can create anti-racist life. In other words, it starts at home. It starts at home. It starts at home appreciating the different styles of music. Some of y'all like classical better than gospel. And you know I like Michael Jackson. So how do we create a space where we can be different? How do we create the space where we can affirm that each of those choices and tastes, including Michael Jackson, is a good one? I'm sorry. How? It was getting heavy. It was needing a little laughter. How can we love the gift of the diversity here so we know how to love the gift of the diversity out there? There was a father who had 2 sons. They were not alike. And he loved them both. That's what home is. A place to be loved just like you are. A place in which you can then become who you are designed to be. You are homemakers. It's your job to create that space. Amen.